welcome to Cinemike. For this episode, I'm going to review Justice League. I'm going to start off by saying that I'm a huge fan of these characters and DC Comics. I grew up with the old Superman and Batman film series, the animated series. I love the comics, like Year One, The Dark Knight Returns. Chris Nolan's Dark Knight movies were obviously instant classics. That's what made some of these new DCEU movies more difficult for me, because being a huge fan, I have expectations that they have not been able to meet. And it appears that there are many others to share my opinion judging by reviews and message boards and some of the criticisms. The DCEU has had a rocky road to get where it is now, with Marvel paving the way for shared universes, culminating in highly anticipated team-ups. DC wanted a piece of that action. Unlike Marvel, though, they wanted to rush to the finish line. They didn't take the time to set up their heroes properly or make them teaming up feel like a true event. The series has been criticized for being too dark and unfaithful to the spirit of the comics. In Man of Steel, we had a Superman that causes the deaths of almost as many people as Zod in Collateral Damage. In Batman v Superman, we have a Dark Knight that murders his foes, sometimes even with guns. Then there's Suicide Squad, which looked like it was slapped together by an MTV music video director. Well, it appears that DC listened to the criticisms, because then we got Wonder Woman, the first film in the series to get the formula right and deliver a truly good superhero movie. However, many of the fans still remain skeptical, as Zack Snyder, the director of Man of Steel and BVS, was back at the helm for this. Would he be able to adjust his style to fit the expectations placed on this film? Well, the rumors of production troubles didn't instill much faith. Usually trouble behind the scenes leads to issues with the finished product. So I went into this movie with pretty low expectations. And you know what? Maybe it was because my expectations were so low that it had nowhere to go but up. But I gotta say that I was actually pretty surprised with this movie. Now, that's not to say that it was great, because that's going too far. It was a movie with flaws, but compared to Batman v Superman, it was definitely an improvement. Joss Whedon was brought on board for a series of reshoots. He also directed The Avengers, which you could say is kind of a questionable choice to have the guy that made the competing ensemble superhero film do this as well. But this was due to a personal tragedy that Zack Snyder needed to take time to deal with. Really sad story there, by the way. But there were also rumors that Whedon was assigned to lighten the tone and add more humor because the studio felt that the movie had problems. That they really wanted this to be more of a crowd pleaser than Batman v Superman was. So, was this more of a Zack Snyder movie or a Joss Whedon movie? Well, Ben Affleck said that it was a Snyder movie with a little Joss Whedon seasoning. I think that's fair, but I will say that there was definitely moments that I strongly tasted Whedon's flavor. That statement sounds weird, but you catch my meaning. There was a lot of the traditional Snyder way of doing things, but then there'd be a sudden joke or fun banter between characters that felt very Whedon-like. How much of this was Snyder trying to lighten up, and how much of it were reshoots by Whedon, is hard to say. In general, the direction is relatively consistent, minus one or two tonal shifts. The story this time unites our heroes to fight Steppenwolf, who is essentially a god that is leading an army of parademons in search for 3 ancient mother boxes. Once he brings together all 3 of them, then it's your typical end-of-the-world scenario. First off, the visual effects for Steppenwolf feels unnecessary. I don't know what it is with these movies and their giant cartoony CGI monsters, but it rarely looks good to me. You could have accomplished his look with makeup and prosthetics on the actor Kieran Hines, maybe use just a little CGI to enhance the effect. The CGI in general in this movie is overused and a bit fake looking. It makes some of the action look like cutscenes from a video game. I've said it before and I'll keep saying it. The best action is when it feels real and gritty. You want the audience to feel the danger, and that can't happen as effectively when there's too much CGI. Something about it disconnects that danger. The more practical elements that you can use, then the better. That said, there is also some moments where the action works, especially in the second half of the movie where our heroes start to come together. It's funny to see how some of them bounce off each other, and The Flash also has some enjoyable sequences. Anyways, jumping back to Steppenwolf though, he really is just your typical bad guy off of the assembly line. Very one-dimensional and just wants power and to destroy everything. You've seen it before. Obviously, when you're dealing with an ensemble superhero movie, then it makes it harder to give time to establishing a good villain. But you see, Marvel cracked the code on this with their first Avengers film by having their heroes and their villain already set up in the previous movies so that they could hit the ground running. With Justice League, there was so much that still wasn't established. which makes it surprising that they chose to cut this down to 120 minutes, making this the shortest DCEU movie yet. You can see that a few scenes are missing from the trailer here, and I'm sure there's going to be a director's cut. Even with the shorter runtime, the first part of this movie really drags to get things rolling. It feels both rushed and slow at the same time. It's rushed because they are shoveling exposition down our throats, but it's slow because that kind of storytelling is not very exciting. Now, people that were fans of Batman v Superman might have some issues with this movie because even though I didn't appreciate how they developed the characters in that one, they did still take more time. There's one sequence where Diana is explaining Steppenwolf's backstory, and I swear it sounds like the opening narration to Lord of the Rings or something. One box went to the Atlanteans, one box went to the Amazonians, and one box went to the race of man. One box to rule them all. I tossed in that last bit there for effect, but you catch my point. It's just that they had to do a lot of catch-up for the audience, and it wasn't done in a very creative way. Then there's also trying to establish heroes like the Flash and Aquaman, who've only appeared in brief cameos before this. So they give us some quick personal scenes for them that are shoved in there, and it feels a bit out of context, especially if you're not familiar with them. So some of you will need patience to get through this section. It's not bad, it's just that it's not very engaging. Well, thankfully, once the whole team is together, then the pacing does improve. I didn't geek out seeing them on screen together for the first time as much as I would have liked to, but after that, they did mesh pretty well together. The cast of actors in these movies are always pretty good, with exceptions like Jesse Eisenberg, as the worst version of Lex Luthor that you can imagine. Aside from that, though, our characters are all very well cast. Even in BVS, they managed to rise above some of the mediocrity. I will say that this movie still does focus somewhat on style over substance, which is something that, these movies have been accused of before. So while we do get some fun banter and interactions from our heroes, there isn't much in the way of character development. Ben Affleck returns as Bruce Wayne, aka Batman. With Superman gone, he takes it upon himself to honor his legacy and to form this team. Once again, he does a pretty good job of playing an older, world-weary Dark Knight. Like the rest of this movie, he is also a bit lighter than he was in BVS. There's some humor in there with him, especially in his interactions with the Flash. One of the things that I like about Affleck's Batman is that he reminds me a bit of the animated series version of the character. Well, except for the part about killing people. It was nice in this one that he isn't murdering people or planning the murder of someone. Though he does still kill parademons, and he still picks up a gun at one point, so some room for improvement, but he is a bit closer this time. Gal Gadot is also back as Diana Prince, aka Wonder Woman. She truly is the shining star of this series so far. She brings her greatness from her solo film into this and just truly imbues the character with all of the strength and wisdom that you could hope for. It's very difficult to come up with anything not to love about how she plays this character. She truly is wonderful. We have Ezra Miller as Barry Allen, aka The Flash. Miller turns out to be one of the highlights of the movie. He's very clearly the most Joss Whedon character with his quirky, fun sense of humor. There's this really fun scene where Barry is speeding towards an opponent who is able to react to him in the Speed Force, and Miller's expression of total surprise is so great. This is a much more comedic and nerdy version of Barry than we've seen previously, which I was initially on the fence about, but in the end, I can't deny that he brought an energy to this movie that was very needed. He's socially awkward and pretty inexperienced, so Batman becomes like a mentor figure to him. I really enjoyed their relationship, and it's also a lot of fun because he's totally geeking out over these heroes. So in a way, he's kind of representing us, the fans. While he is tons of fun, I will say that there was maybe one or two times where his humor was being pushed maybe just a little too much. Some jokes felt slightly forced. Jason Momoa plays Arthur Curry, aka Aquaman. Unfortunately, Aquaman has become more of a joke to many fans in recent years. They make fun of his outfit, and that he can talk to fish. So in comparison to the other heroes, he has the biggest changes from the source material. They wanted to make him more badass, and of course, Momoa oozes that kind of charm. He may not be the Aquaman that I remember reading as a kid, but I can't deny that he's fun to watch. There's a great scene where the Lasso of Truth gets some pretty interesting comments out of Aquaman's mouth. There's only one scene I can think of that was a little out of place, where he throws an empty liquor bottle into the ocean. That seems a little out of character for him, considering he's kind of big on not polluting the ocean. Ray Fisher plays Victor Stone, aka Cyborg. There were rumors that some of the reshoots had involved him because the studio wasn't satisfied with how he was presented. He is probably the weakest character of the group, but it's hard to compete when everyone else is funny and colorful. Cyborg is the straight man. He takes this seriously, and the result is that he's maybe a little more bland. I don't think the actor can be faulted for any of this, though, because it's just the way he was written and directed from the looks of it. He is actually a pretty important member of the group, though, because he has a true connection to one of the mother boxes, which saved his life and granted him these cybernetic enhancements. There's a bunch of supporting cast members. Some of them are new, like J.K. Simmons, returning to the comic book world for the first time since the Spider-Man films as Commissioner James Gordon. There's also some returning actors like Jeremy Irons as Alfred, Amy Adams as Lois Lane, and Diane Lane as Martha Kent. Martha! Why did you say that name? All of them are great actors, and are solid with what they had to work with. But it wasn't very much. They would have been served more if some of this was saved for the solo movies, like introducing Gordon or Martha and Lois struggling with the loss of Clark. The loss of Superman to this world plays a big part in this story. I think it would have helped if the previous films didn't make him appear so deadly and destructive. He also barely got a chance to earn the level of love and admiration from the world that we see here. His death should have happened later in the series to earn that more. The Doomsday Death of Superman storyline that was crammed into BVS also should have been its own film. And this may get into minor spoiler territory here, but you could maybe make that criticism towards rushing through his return in this as well. I don't think that I'm really spoiling this by bringing up that Henry Cavill returns as Clark Kent, aka Superman, in this movie. The trailers have teased this, there's been pictures of him on set, and he's appeared in some of the posters. It would be very easy to devote an entire film to his return. There's certainly plenty of source material for it. However, I did find myself enjoying the movie more once he came back. I guess that's when it truly felt like a Justice League movie. You can't have the Justice League without him in my mind. Also, I thought that this was the best representation of him in these newer films, and that's considering that he wasn't in this one that much. He didn't feel all dark, conflicted, and emo about things this time. He truly felt like that bright beacon of hope that the world can rally behind. I also really enjoyed his interactions with the Flash and Batman. Some awkwardness there since in their previous encounter he was trying to kill him. So in the end, it is ultimately just an okay movie. Maybe even a decent movie at best. But an okay movie from this series feels like a good one at this point. I'm just glad to see any improvement at all coming from this. It still fails to come close to being as good as the first Avengers film, but that wasn't going to happen with the missteps taken in the movies leading up to this. Wonder Woman, of course, is the exception, as that was great. The best thing that I can say about Justice League is that it shows that DC is listening to its fans and trying to get better. I would have said that it gives me hope for the future of this series if it wasn't for all these rumors. Like that Ben Affleck is being replaced in Matt Reeves' solo Batman movie, and possible huge changes in direction creatively in the DCEU. It's a shame if things turn out that chaotic, because I do think that Justice League is a good jumping off point for better films moving forward. If handled right, then this could mark a turning point for the DCEU to truly get on the right track and start delivering consistently good movies. I'm a DC fan, so I would love for them to step up and succeed in the way that Marvel has. Now onto my rating, which I cover on a 1 to 10 scale, with 10 being the very best that a particular film can be for me. So just to compare this with the rest of the DCEU movies, I'd give Man of Steel a 6.5, Batman v Superman a 6, Suicide Squad a 5, and Wonder Woman an 8.5. With Justice League, I'm going to give it a 7. It could have been better, but it definitely could have been worse. And that was my review. So if you enjoyed this video, then please click upvote, and feel free to leave a comment below. Tell me if you agree or disagree, and I also welcome you to follow my channel. You can also follow me on Twitter at CinemaikeNerd. So anyways, until next time, this is Mike, signing off.